Hello students, it's Mr. Maines. I'm here to bring you another English content video. Hope you're ready to sit back and enjoy. Hello English 2 students. I'm going to do a little bit of reading and helpful analysis for Ode to a Nightingale by John Keats. I'm going to go ahead and break it down by stanza, and so my expectation for you is to try to read it through once on your own and then come back to this video to help you with your assignment. Okay, so first stanza. My heart aches and a drowsy numbness pains my sense, as though of hemlock I had drunk or emptied some dull opiate to the drains. 1 minute passed, and leth wards had sunk. 'Tis not through envy of thy happy lot, but being too happy in thine happiness, that thou winged dryad of the trees, in some melodious plot of beechen green and shadows numberless, singest of summer in full-throated ease. Okay, let's start talking about this. We have Ode to a Nightingale. An ode is a song, kind of like of praise. A nightingale is obviously a bird, and it has a sweet song that it sings. So, our poet does not start out singing to a bird, though. He says, my heart aches, and there's a drowsy numbness that pains him in his heart. Maybe you felt like this before. To me, this is clearly speaking of depression and pain that this poet is feeling. If you're quick with math, you might see from the dates of when he was alive that he died a very young man at 25 or 26 years old. Let's keep going. Line 2. My sense, as though of hemlock I had drunk. Hemlock was used as an agent to kill people on death row. It is a plant. I believe hemlock is a flowering plant. And you would kind of brew like a kind of tea with it, I believe, and that would be used to kill people on death row. They would drink it and their body would slowly shut down and die. So that's how he feels. And this is doubling down in line 3. Or emptied some dull opiate into the drains. Opiate, opium, this is a kind of very hard drug. So he's entering into the forest, let's say, feeling sad and so numb that he feels like he's been drugged. Okay, if any of you have ever been on a kind of like anesthesia for a surgery or for something at your dentist's office before, then you understand that kind of numbness that he's kind of talking about right now. So then some time passes. The Leth wards had sunk. I don't know how to pronounce Leth. I'm sorry. Leth comes from Greek mythology. Go ahead and anytime you see a capitalized word like that in the middle of a poem, probably worth a Google search. I believe that is having to do with oblivion in Greek mythology. Oblivion, obviously not a positive thing. So now he's saying tis, which is this, so or it is. So it is not through envy of my happy lot, but being too happy in your happiness, that you light-winged dryad of the trees. So he's calling the nightingale a light-winged dryad of the trees. A dryad, again capitalized here, this is kind of like a fairy-type creature, kind of a fantastical creature of the woods, is a dryad. You feel free to Google it. And some melodious plot of beechen green and shadows numberless, singest of summer in full-throated ease. So he's sad, he's in the forest, and it's easy for the stupid bird to be happy. So it's a marked contrast between how he's feeling and this bird that he sees. All right, stanza 2. Oh, for a draught of vintage that hath been cooled a long age in the deep-delved earth, tasting of flora and the country green, dance and provincial song and sunburnt mirth. Oh, for a beaker full of warm south, full of the true, the blushful hippocrene, with beaded bubbles winking at the brim, and purple-stained mouth, that I might drink and leave the world unseen, and with thee fade away in the forest dim. So now he's saying, I wish I was drunk right now. A drink of vintage, cooled in the deep earth. So we're thinking maybe wine here, right? And clearly a little bit below, it says that he might have a purple stained mouth. So at this time, we should fully recognize that this is talking about red wine, which the tannins in a red wine would stain your teeth, stain your mouth, stain your clothes, just like grape juice. Okay, and so now he's sad in these first two stanzas. Clearly sad. Let's go ahead and keep going. Third stanza. Fade far away, dissolve, and quite forget what thou among the leaves hast never known, the weariness, the fever, and the fret. Here where men sit and hear each other groan, where palsy shakes a few sad last gray hairs, where youth grows pale and spectre thin and dies, where but to think is to be full of sorrow, and laden eyed despairs, where beauty cannot keep her lustrous eyes, or new love pined at them beyond tomorrow. So he's still kind of being a sad boy here, maybe even a sad soy boy, for anybody who understands internet lingo a little bit. He's saying that here it's sad. Maybe his modern life, his in civilization, not in nature, that youth grow pale and spectre thin and die. People grow up. They are at some point you're no longer young. I have a little saying I always say that you're always young until you're not. So at some point in my life, I'm only 30 years old. At some point, I was no longer young to most people that I know in my life. To several people, I am still young. But at some point, you kind of go beyond the general consideration of young. Sorry about the bell. I was really trying to finish this before that bell. But he's saying out in the forest, you don't have these kind of issues. Nature is eternal in a way. That's what these romantic poets really believed in, was nature is this eternal beauty thing, and civilization is kind of a corrupt attempt, an artifice, something fake. That's really what he's getting at here. I'll let you kind of dive into some of the bigger details in the stanza. All right, stanza 4. He's going to talk to the bird. Away, away, for I will fly to thee, not charioted by Bacchus and his pards, but on the viewless wings of poesy. Though the dull brain perplexes and retards, already with you, meaning thee, tender is the night, and haply the queen moon is on her throne, clustered around by her starry fays. But here there is no light, save what from heaven is with the breezes blown, through verdurous glooms and windy mossy ways. Okay, so again, if you see a capitalized word in the middle of a line of poetry, you should probably do a quick Google search. It's probably from Greek mythology, at least in this poem and probably in Emily Dickinson as well. So Bacchus, that is that Greek mythology god who's always seen like laying sideways on like a lounging chair with grapes in his mouth, probably drinking wine as well. He's that god of just pure pleasure. Usually kind of seen tinted green like a dryad would be. Caught the bell again. So now, though the dull brain perplexes and retards, meaning slows down, my interpretation here, which you're going to have a different interpretation, I'm not saying that mine is right, but my interpretation here is that modern life perplexes and slows down the brain. We have not evolved to be sitting under fluorescent lights all day in a cubicle at work for 8, 9, 10 hours a day. We need different things than that. Humans still need exercise. They still need social activity. They still need to be out in nature for our vitamin D, for fresh air. Clearly, we still need nature, even though modern life creates walls literally shutting us out from nature. But just something to think about. My favorite line here is talking about the queen moon on her throne. So maybe there's a full moon in the sky, clustered around by all of her starry fays. Simply talking about the night sky right here, but again bringing in these fantastical creatures. Fays have to do with fairies again, or the world of the fairies that might involve lots of other fun mystical creatures. Think of that kind of like The spirit world in Avatar, The Last Airbender, and Legend of Korra, how there's a spirit world full of these like kind of mystical creature looking things. That's kind of what he's referring to with fays here. Stanza 5. I cannot see what flowers are at my feet, nor what soft incense hangs upon the boughs. But embalmed darkness guess each sweet wherewith the seasonable month endows the grass, the thicket, and the fruit tree wild, while hawthorn and the pastoral eglantine, fast fading violets covered up in leaves, and mid-May's eldest child, the coming musk rose full of dewy wine, the murmurous haunt of flies on summer eves. So he's kind of fully indulging in nature by stanza 5. He cannot even see what flowers are at its feet, it's too dark, nor what soft incense hangs upon the boughs. A bough is a branch, like a big tree branch. So he can't see like kind of like what's hanging from the trees above him, nor can he see or determine which flowers he's stepping on below him. He's embalmed in darkness, but he's guessing with each sweet sense. He's using his smell and his feel to determine kind of like what's around him. So he's stepping on thick grass, and he's around fruit trees. Hawthorn, you might know as a plant for those who went to Hawthorne Elementary School. Now there's fast-fading violets covered up in leaves, and mid-May's eldest child, the coming musk rose. So musk rose is something that blooms in mid-May. That's what he's referring to here. This flower that blooms at a certain time, he's just referring to it kind of poetically. So again, he's using his senses out in nature. Not something you always do in kind of modern, closed-off life, of closing your eyes, letting the wind kind of brush over you, and just letting your nose smell what it's going to smell, and letting your ears kind of hear those sounds of nature. As a romantic poet, he's using nature to calm himself and bring him kind of back to center. Stanza 6. Darkling, I listen, and for many a time I have been half in love with easeful death. Call him soft names in many a mused rhyme, to take into the air my quiet breath. Now more than ever seems it rich to die, to cease upon the midnight with no pain, while thou art pouring forth thy soul abroad in such an ecstasy. Still wouldst thou sing, and I have ears in vain, to thy high requiem become a sod. Okay, so he's becoming sad again. Okay, he's tried to escape in nature, right? He started out so sad. Now those bad thoughts are coming back. Maybe you have experience with this before where you kind of distract yourself enough to get some bad thoughts out of your head, but they come back uninvited sometimes, right? So he says, I've been half in love with easeful death. That's capital D, death. So it might help to think of like the Grim Reaper here as the embodiment of death. So he says that he's called death soft names in many amused rhyme. So he's like, hey, I've written some poetry to death before, or about death before. I've asked death in these poems to take into the air my quiet breath. So he's flirted with the idea of dying, or maybe even with the idea of committing suicide, or rather completing suicide. Now more than ever seems it rich to die. So he's like, now might be a good time as ever, which is a good time to stop and just say, if you have these thoughts, you should definitely let somebody know, a therapist, a counselor, somebody that you trust, a family member. I have lots of personal experience with this, so if you have nobody else to reach out to me. You should know my email address by now. If not, it's tmains@fc.k12.mo.us. Let's continue. So he's sad again, and yet he speaks again to the bird here on, let's see, line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. While you are pouring forth that soul abroad in such an ecstasy. So he's like, here I am, sad and thinking about dying, and there you are, bird, up in the sky, up in that tree, just pouring forth your song, just singing out into the air with such ecstasy, such enjoyment. Still you would sing, and I have ears in vain, So now he's saying, if I were dead, goes back to kind of the middle, right? If I were dead, would you still be singing? Right? This goes back to the idea of nature as eternal. So even if this sad person wasn't in the woods to hear this bird singing, that bird would still be singing. Life goes on is kind of what's happening here. The bad times pass and nature keeps going. Life keeps living. Stanza 7. Thou wast not born for death, immortal bird. No hungry generations tread thee down. The voice I hear this passing night was heard in ancient days by emperor and clown. Perhaps the selfsame song that found a path through the sad heart of Ruth when sick for home. She stood in tears amid the alien corn, the same that ofttimes hath charmed magic casements opening on the foam of perilous seas in fairy lands forlorn. Great stanza. So, you were not born for death is how you translate that first part of the first line into modern English. You were not born for death, immortal bird. Okay? So he's saying, hey, bird, you were not born to die like we humans seem to have been, according to Mr. Keats here. You're immortal, right? You represent nature. You represent the ecstasy that is life to live. No hungry generations tread you down. The voice I hear this passing night was heard in ancient days by emperor and clown. Great line, right? So this is saying, again, nature is eternal. So in ancient days, kings, emperors, and peasants and clowns, and everybody in between, they could all go out and hear your song, you beautiful little bird. Stanza 8, last one. Forlorn! The very word is like a bell to toil me back from thee to my sole self. Adieu, the fancy cannot cheat so well as she is famed to do, deceiving elf. Adieu, adieu, thy plaintive anthem fades, past the near meadows, over the still stream, up the hillside, and now 'tis buried deep in the next valley glades. Was it a vision or a waking dream? Fled is that music, do I wake or sleep? Okay, we have our ending. And then once again, a poem ending with some adieus, some nice French goodbyes. All right, so the very word is like a bell. Okay, I want that image of the bell to ring throughout this stanza. That was actually unintended, but bell and ring is going to fit in right here. So that's what he's been doing this whole time, sliding back and forth like a bell. All right, so he's sad on one side, and then he's kind of euphoric a little bit out in nature, in like a highly meditative state, we could say. So he says goodbye to this bird because the bird is flying away. So at that line in the middle, past the near meadows, over the still stream, up the hillside, and now it is buried deep in the next valley glades. So he's kind of walking with this bird maybe, or the bird has just been singing in a tree branch while he's been there, and now the bird has flown away. Okay? And now he's starting to kind of doubt his memory a little bit. Was this a vision or a waking dream, like a daydream? This is fled. Fled is that music. Do I wake or sleep? Has this all been a dream, or am I awake? Okay? So this is him, again, just kind of dealing with what is happening around him. What am I here for? Trying to find his purpose, trying to deal with his sadness, trying to deal with his depression, his anxiety. And now this bird is gone, and he's once again kind of sad. But maybe he's learned something, right? I'll leave you with a couple thoughts, and that's the rhyme scheme. You may have picked up on it yourself, but each stanza has the following rhyme scheme: A B A B, C D E C D E. So most of you probably know what that means by now, but let's just looking at stanza 8. Bell, self, well, elf. That's A B A B. Bell and well, elf and self. Then we have 3 lines with no rhyming endings. That's a C D E. Okay, so fades, stream, deep. But those 3 lines rhyme with the next 3 lines. So glades, dream, and sleep. Fades and glades, stream and dream, deep and sleep. This is the rhyme scheme for the whole poem. Mr. Keats is one of the most well-known, celebrated poets of the English language. I highly recommend doing a little bit of reading about him. It should help you with this assignment. But I hope this video has also been helpful, and see you next time.